The champagne was perfectly chilled, the kind of cold that only matters when you're 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, sitting in a seat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, staring at a merger document that was about to make Kong Ji-hoon the most powerful tech billionaire in East Asia. His pen hovered over the final clause. One signature, one stroke of the wrist. $3 billion would fold neatly into his empire like a napkin at a five-star restaurant. He had done this before. Signed things that changed lives. Signed things that ended careers, launched companies, and restructured entire industries. He was good at it. Cold, precise, deliberate. His secretary called him a machine. His board called him a genius. The Korean financial press called him the Iron Heir. None of those titles bothered him. None of them were wrong. He uncapped his pen. "Good evening, sir. Can I offer you something to drink before we begin our beverage service?" The voice stopped him, not because it was loud, not because it was unusual. It was the softest voice in the cabin, measured and professional, the kind of voice trained to soothe nervous flyers and impress difficult passengers. But something about its cadence reached inside his chest and pulled. His hand stilled. The pen didn't move. He told himself it was turbulence, except the air outside was glass smooth and the flight path was clean all the way to New York. He looked up. The world tilted. Standing at the edge of his private cabin, tray in hand, dressed in the deep navy uniform of Atlas International Airlines, her braids pinned back neatly, her dark skin catching the warm overhead light like she had been sculpted specifically to exist in this exact moment, was Amara Thompson, his ex-wife, the woman he had spent 4 years and an embarrassing amount of private investigator fees trying to find. She saw him at the same moment he saw her, and the champagne glass on her tray made a single sharp sound against the second glass, a delicate collision that neither of them acknowledged because they were both too busy forgetting how to breathe. Her eyes, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him across a small restaurant table in Itaewon and made him feel like the world had finally decided to be kind, went wide. Then they went professional. Then they went carefully, deliberately, painfully blank. "Sir," she said. Her voice did not shake. He almost respected that. "Amara." His voice did shake. He did not respect himself for it. She placed the glass on his table with the practiced grace of someone who had trained herself to be invisible in difficult rooms, and she said, "Can I get you anything else?" As though he were a stranger. As though she had not once stood in a white dress in a small civil registry office in Mapo district and promised him everything. He stared at her. "You disappeared," he said. She walked away. He sat in that seat for the next 40 minutes without moving, without signing, without drinking the champagne, staring at a merger document that no longer meant anything to him. Every time she passed through the cabin, refilling glasses, adjusting overhead luggage, speaking softly to other passengers, he tracked her with the intensity of a man who had spent years learning to forget a face and had just discovered that every memory was still perfectly intact. The way she tilted her head when she listened, the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth when she was trying not to react to something, the way her hands moved, always graceful, always deliberate. She never looked at him again. He looked at nothing else. When turbulence hit somewhere over the northern stretch of the flight, sudden and sharp enough to make several passengers gasp, Amara was mid-aisle, moving toward the front of the cabin. She stumbled. Just once. Just enough. His hand shot out and caught her wrist. It was instinct. 4 years of searching had not killed the instinct. She caught herself and pulled her arm back in the same breath, and for exactly 1 second, they were close enough that he could see the thing she was trying to hide. The tremor in her jaw, the way she pressed her lips together and looked somewhere past his shoulder, the small war happening behind her eyes. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. "You've always been fine. That's the problem." She moved away. He waited until 40 minutes before landing. then pressed the call button. When she appeared, her expression was composed in the way that expensive training produces. Pleasant surface, nothing underneath, completely unreadable. "Mr. Kang, how can I help you?" "I'd like to file a complaint," he said. She blinked once. "I'm sorry to hear that. I can connect you with our senior. I'd like to file it personally, in private, when we land." "Sir, there are proper channels for Amara." He said her name like a door opening. "You're not getting off this plane without talking to me." She held his gaze for a moment, and something flickered there. Something that was not quite anger, and not quite longing, and was probably, he thought, some combination of every complicated emotion that accumulated between two people who had loved each other and lost each other in the worst possible way. "I'll inform the ground team," she said, and walked away. He finally signed the merger document. He wasn't sure why. Force of habit, maybe. Or maybe it was the simple fact that billionaires do not stop being billionaires just because their hearts are doing something inconvenient. The private Atlas Lounge at JFK was the kind of room designed to make powerful people feel comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. Muted lighting, soft carpet, a drinks cart that nobody touched, wide windows showing the tarmac where the world continued moving while inside. Time felt suspended. Ji-hoon stood when she walked in. She didn't sit. "You have 10 minutes, she said. And she folded her arms across her chest like a woman building a wall with whatever material was available. 4 years, he said. 10 minutes, Ji-hoon. You vanished. Your number, your address, your family moved. I didn't even know which country you were in. I had investigators on 3 continents. And yet here I am, she said, her voice flat. Still breathing. Imagine that. Why? He took a step toward her. Why did you leave without telling me? Without a single word? You were my wife. Something crossed her face then, fast and sharp, like lightning that doesn't intend to be seen. Was I? She said quietly. Because the last thing I heard was that you were engaged. Not to me. He went very still. I heard it from your own family's press release, she continued, and now there was something beneath the professionalism, something that had been sitting in a locked room for 4 years and was done being patient. Han Seo-yeon, political heiress, perfect family, perfect alliance. I read the entire announcement. 3 paragraphs about her background and 2 sentences about how the union would strengthen the Kang Group's government ties. She paused. I wasn't mentioned. I had been erased. Amara, I understood, she said. And the way she said it, the controlled devastation of it, hit him harder than anger would have. I understood what I was. I was the mistake your family tolerated. The American flight attendant who caught your attention for a few months. The footnote. And when the real chapter started, the footnote gets removed. That is not what happened. Then what happened? She said, and her voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to tell him that the wall was real, but not impenetrable. Tell me what happened, Ji-hoon, because from where I was standing, you chose your family's empire. I chose you, he said. I have always chosen you. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. She looked at him, and he could see her deciding whether to believe him, weighing it against 4 years of pain and survival, and building a life on the rubble of something she thought had been deliberately demolished. Then why, she said carefully, was there an engagement announcement? Because my mother issued it without my knowledge, he said, and before I could stop it, you were gone. The word mother landed like a stone in still water, and Amara went very quiet. Chairwoman Kang Myung-ja was not a woman who was discussed lightly. She had built the Kang Group from a mid-tier electronics manufacturer into a multinational conglomerate through 40 years of precise, patient, occasionally ruthless decision-making. She was the kind of woman who identified threats before they became problems and neutralized them before they became threats. She wore silk and spoke softly, and had never in her life needed to raise her voice because she had always arranged circumstances to do the shouting for her. Amara had met her exactly once, 12 minutes in a marble-floored office on the 63rd floor of the Kang Tower in Seoul. She had sat across from a woman who looked at her the way a chess player looks at a piece on the wrong square. Not with malice, exactly, but with the calm certainty that the piece would be moved. "Your relationship with my son is a distraction," Chairwoman Kang had said, and she had said it pleasantly, the way one mentions the weather. "I don't say this unkindly. You are clearly an intelligent woman. But Kang Ji-hoon is not a man who can afford distractions. Not at this stage." Amara had told Ji-hoon about the meeting that evening. He had been furious. He had called his mother. There had been a long, loud conversation that she had heard through the walls of his apartment. She had believed afterward that it was settled. She had been wrong. 3 weeks after that conversation, while Ji-hoon was in Tokyo closing a deal, a woman had appeared at the door of the apartment Amara and Ji-hoon shared in Seoul. Not Chairwoman Kang herself. She did not do her own errands, but a composed young executive assistant, carrying a slim folder. Inside the folder were photographs. Amara's younger brother, Marcus, outside his university campus. Her mother, walking from a grocery store in Atlanta. Her father's small auto repair business, the one he had spent 20 years building. Financial documents showing the outstanding loan on that business. A number, written in clean script, beside it. "The chairwoman would like to offer a gesture of goodwill toward your family," the assistant had said, in perfectly accented English. "Your father's loan cleared, a full scholarship for your brother, a monthly allowance to your mother for 5 years, in exchange for a clean separation." She paused. "The chairwoman also wanted you to be aware that the engagement between Mr. Kang and Miss Han has been announced this morning." Amara had looked at those photographs for a very long time. She had asked one question. "Does Ji-hoon know about this offer?" The assistant had smiled carefully. "Mr. Kang is fully aware of his family's intentions." She had been lied to. She had not known it then. She took the money. She packed 2 suitcases. She left a note that said only, "I understand. Please don't look for me." She moved her family to a different city. She transferred to a new airline route. She rebuilt, quietly, painfully, with the particular determination of a woman who had decided that surviving was its own kind of victory. She had not cried on the plane leaving Seoul. She had cried exactly once, in a hotel bathroom in Dubai during a layover, and then she had washed her face and gone back to work and refused to cry again. Now she stood in a JFK lounge and listened to Kang Ji-hoon tell her that everything she had believed was a lie, and she wanted, with an intensity that frightened her, to believe him. "The engagement was false," he said. "My mother announced it to the press to create a public fact that would be difficult to undo. I broke it within a week. Han Seo-yeon knew it was never real. She had her own reasons for agreeing to the arrangement temporarily. I flew back from Tokyo, and I went to our apartment, and you were gone." He stopped. His voice had gone rough. "Your key was on the counter. Your closet was empty. There was a note that told me to stop looking." "And you looked anyway," she said, not quite a question. "I looked for 4 years," he said. "Yes." She turned away from him, facing the window, watching a cargo plane taxi slowly across the tarmac. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman holding herself together with extraordinary effort. "Your mother sent someone to my apartment," she said. "They had photographs of my family, my brother's schedule, my father's debt." She paused. "They told me you knew." The silence behind her was devastating. "She had your family surveilled," he said. His voice had changed. It had gone quiet in the particular way of someone who is very, very angry and is not yet ready to express it. "It seems so." "How long?" long enough to know exactly what pressure to apply. She turned back to face him. She's good at what she does, Ji-hoon. I'll give her that. He sat down. She had never, in the years she had known him, seen him sit down like that. Not with confidence, not decisively, but with the weight of something he hadn't been prepared to carry. She destroyed our marriage, he said. She protected her empire, Amara said, and there was no bitterness in it. Just the flat accuracy of a woman who had spent 4 years understanding exactly what had happened to her. We were a threat to the plan. She eliminated the threat. It's what she does. Amara. He looked up at her. I am sorry. I know that is insufficient. It is, she agreed. I know it doesn't undo. It doesn't. I know you don't owe me anything. I don't. He stood up. He crossed the distance between them and stopped, close enough that she had to make the choice to hold her ground or step back. She held her ground. She had always been better at standing firm than he gave her credit for. Then let me earn it, he said. Let me show you what actually happened. Every record, every investigation file, everything I did to find you, everything my mother did to make sure I couldn't. He held her gaze. You built your life. I know that. I'm not asking you to demolish it. I'm asking you to look at the truth before you decide what to do with it. She looked at him for a long time. Fine, she said finally. Back in Seoul, in the 63rd floor office of Kong Tower, Chairwoman Kong received a brief message from one of the 3 people she employed specifically to monitor her son's movements. The message contained 4 words. He found her. JFK. The chairwoman set down her tea. She folded her hands on her desk. She looked out at the city spread below her like a map she had spent decades learning to read. Prepare the board, she said to the assistant beside her, and find out everything about her current situation. The assistant nodded and left quietly. The chairwoman returned to her tea. She was not alarmed. She had managed this before. She would manage it again. She was, however, paying attention. Ji-hoon spent 3 days in New York. He rescheduled 4 meetings, delegated 2 others, and told his secretary, who had seen him survive hostile takeovers, public scandals, and a particularly grueling regulatory investigation, that he needed a week. His secretary, who had also never heard him use the word need in a non-corporate context, simply said, "Yes, sir," and blocked his calendar. He and Amara met at a small cafe in Brooklyn that she had chosen. Neutral ground, public space, her terms. She came in her own clothes, without the uniform, and he was struck again by the fact that 4 years had not diminished anything. She was sharper now, more certain of herself. She sat, across from him, with the posture of a woman who had learned, through hard experience, exactly how much space she was entitled to take up. He showed her the investigation files. 12 folders, organized by year, containing records of every lead his team had followed and lost. Flight manifests that had been altered, addresses that led to empty apartments. A paper trail so carefully disrupted that even his investigators, the expensive kind, the kind who found people who did not want to be found, had spent 18 months hitting walls. She had people inside the search, he said, watching Amara flip through the files. Someone on my team was feeding her information. She knew every lead before we did. Amara looked up. She had your investigators compromised. One of them. It was enough. He paused. I fired the entire team when I found out. Hired a new one. Started again. By then you had changed routes, and the airline's HR privacy protections made it difficult to... I requested a privacy flag on my employment record, she said, after I left Seoul. I know. I found it eventually. It took 2 years. She looked at him across the table, across 2 cups of coffee that had gone cold, across the accumulated wreckage of everything they had almost been, and she said, You really didn't know. I really didn't know. She looked back at the files. He watched her face do something complicated, grief and anger moving through it like weather, followed by something harder to name, something that might have been, if he was reading her correctly. The slow dissolution of a story she had told herself for 4 years. "I should have asked more questions," she said quietly. "When that woman came to the apartment. I should have. I was so certain. The photographs, the press release, the offer. It all felt like confirmation of something I had already been afraid of." She closed the folder. "I let my fear make my decisions." "You were protecting your family," said. "You were doing what she knew you would do. She chose the lever carefully." "She's very good," Amara said again. "I know," he said. "I grew up watching her work." That afternoon, he showed her something else, a recording, obtained through means he did not fully detail, of a conversation between his mother and the assistant who had visited Amara's apartment. The audio was partial, 3 minutes of a longer conversation, but it was enough. His mother's calm voice, discussing the transaction. The phrase, "The girl will comply, she doesn't have the network to resist." The instruction to inform Amara that Ji-hoon was aware of the offer. Amara listened to the recording once. Then she sat very still for a moment. "She told you I was the one who wanted to leave," Amara said. "It wasn't a question." "She told me you had accepted a settlement and requested no further contact," he said. "She showed me a letter. It had your signature." "I signed a receipt," Amara said. Her voice had gone, flat again. That armor she wore over the tender things. "For the money transfer, for my father's loan. That's all I signed." "I know that now," he said. "She forged the rest." "Yes." Amara stood up. She walked to the cafe window and looked out at the Brooklyn street, at the ordinary people passing by in their ordinary lives, none of them aware that in this small room, a woman was systematically dismantling a grief she had carried for 4 years and discovering that it had been built on a lie. "I need a day," she said. "Take whatever you need." "Don't push me," she said. "When I'm ready to talk, I'll call you." He gave her his new number. He left the cafe first because she asked him to. He walked 3 blocks before he stopped on the sidewalk and stood there in the November cold, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. The particular terrifying sensation of hope. She called him the next evening. She said, "I want to see the rest of it, the full investigation records, and I want to know what you're planning to do about your mother." He said, "I've already started." The investigation into Chairwoman Kang's interference took 10 days. Ji-hoon had advantages his previous investigators hadn't had. He knew now specifically what he was looking for, and he had access to his own company's internal security archive. What emerged was detailed and damning, a paper trail of coercion that extended beyond Amara, touching 2 previous relationships his mother had quietly terminated, a junior executive who had been forced out after getting too close to Ji-hoon's inner circle, and a financial arrangement with a media consultant hired to manage what Chairwoman Kang called narrative risks around her son's personal life. He brought everything to Amara. He watched her read through it at his dining table, surrounded by folders and a cold cup of tea, and he watched the last pieces of the story click into place for her. He watched her understand, fully and completely, the architecture of the manipulation. He watched her hands tighten on the paper and then consciously relax. He watched her breathe. "She's been doing this for a long time," Amara said. "Since my father died. Since she decided the company was more important than anything else, including me." He paused. "I think she loves me. I think this is what it looks like, from her perspective, protecting the family." "I know," Amara said quietly. "That makes it worse." He nodded. She looked up at him, and in her eyes, he saw the thing he had been watching for. The grief was still there, but it had shifted. It was no longer a wall. It was something she was holding, examining, deciding what to do with. "She took 4 years from us," Amara said. "Yes." "She surveilled my family. She forged documents. She paid someone to lie to me about the most important thing in my life." She set the folder down. "I have been carrying the belief that you chose an empire over me for 4 years. Ji-hoon. I built my entire understanding of myself, of my worth, around the idea that, in the end, I wasn't enough, that I was replaceable. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. Do you understand what that does to a person? Tell me, he said. I stopped trusting my own instincts, she said. Every time I met someone who was kind to me, I waited for the price. Every time something good happened, I looked for the catch. I worked twice as hard as everyone else, and let myself believe that was normal because I was convinced that the only value I had was what I could produce. She stopped. I loved you enough to let you hate me, and I hated myself for it for years before I figured out how to stop. He crossed the room to her. She let him. I loved you enough to spend 4 years refusing to believe you were gone, he said. I turned down 2 arranged marriages. I fired half my executive team. I barely slept. He searched her face. I know none of that gives back what she took. I know it doesn't fix 4 years of what she put you through. I know you built something without me, and I have no right to ask you to rebuild it around me again. He reached up and touched her face, gently, like someone handling something infinitely precious. But I am asking. Marry me again, Amara. Let me do it right this time. The silence stretched between them. She didn't answer. Not that evening. She stood up, gathered her coat, and at the door she turned back and said, I'll think about it. And he thought he saw, before she turned away, the beginning of something in her expression that was not quite a smile, but was in the same family. She thought about it for 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, she had long phone calls with her mother in Atlanta. She had coffee with her closest friend from flight training, a no-nonsense Jamaican woman named Patrice, who listened to the entire story, and then said, Baby, if you don't see how this ends, I cannot help you. She took long walks in Prospect Park, alone, with her thoughts and the cold November air, and she dismantled every argument she had been making against hope and examined it honestly. She had built a good life. That was real. She had completed an online business degree. She had saved money carefully. She had applied, quietly, to a management trainee program at the airline, and she had been accepted. She was not who she had been when she left Seoul, small and frightened and convinced that love was a luxury she had lost the right to. She was someone who had survived and grown and made herself. That was not something she was willing to give up, but she was also done lying to herself about what she felt. She called Ji-hoon on a Tuesday morning and said, I need 2 things before I answer your question. He said without hesitation, Name them. First, she said, I need you to understand that I come back as myself, not as an appendage to your empire, not as a liability to be managed or a gap to be filled. I built something and I'm proud of it, and it comes with me. I know, he said. I would not ask for anything less. Second, she said, I need you to handle your mother, not for me, for yourself. Because you cannot keep building your life on a foundation she is still controlling, and you know it. Silence. I know it, he said. Then we can talk. The confrontation with Chairwoman Kang happened on a Wednesday. Ji-hoon arranged it at the company boardroom rather than her office. A deliberate choice, a statement about where the power in this conversation resided. He arrived with his legal team and a thick folder of documentation. His mother arrived immaculate, unhurried, and utterly unsurprised, which told him everything he needed to know about her intelligence operation. She sat across from him and looked at the folder and said nothing. He laid it out methodically. The coercion, the forgery, the surveilled investigation, the paid interference. He spoke for 22 minutes and she listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of confirmation. When he finished, she said, I protected you from weakness. He had known she would say something like that. He had prepared for it. And still, it landed with the force of a slap. You destroyed my marriage, he said. I protected the company. You forged documents in my name. You had my wife's family surveilled and threatened. You had my own investigators compromised. He leaned forward. There is no version of this that is protection. This is control. You have been running my personal life like a subsidiary since my father died, and I am done treating it as loyalty. She looked at him across the table, and for the first time in his memory, he saw something uncertain move behind her eyes. She is not suitable. She is my wife, he said. She will be my wife again. That decision has been made. What you are deciding right now is whether you want to remain a part of this family, or whether you want me to take everything I have in this folder to the company ethics board and let them decide what Khan Group does with a chairwoman who forged documents and coerced her son's spouse. He paused. I would prefer the first option. I believe you prefer it too. The silence was long and cold. You would not, she said. I would, he said. I have already transferred voting authority documents to my legal team as a contingency. It takes one email. She looked at him for a very long time. Then she said, You have your father's stubbornness. I have your stubbornness, he said. That's what makes this credible, and you know it. Something shifted in the room. Not warmth. That was too much to hope for between these two in this place. But a kind of acknowledgement, a recognition of where the lines now were. What do you want? She said. I want you to step back from my personal life, completely and permanently. I want a formal restructuring of voting rights that ensures the board cannot be used to pressure decisions about my private affairs. And I want a private acknowledgement, not public. I'm not interested in humiliating you, of what you did to Amara and what it cost. She was quiet for a moment. And if I refuse? Then we have a much longer conversation, he said, and it involves significantly more people than are currently in this room. She left without agreeing and without refusing. She left the way powerful people leave rooms when they are recalculating, with composure and without looking back. 2 days later, her legal team contacted his. Negotiations on the voting restructure began. It was not a surrender. Ji-hoon knew his mother well enough to know that she was not done, that she was regrouping, that there would be other attempts. But it was a line that had never existed before, and it was enough to move forward. He told Amara everything. She listened, and she asked questions, and she nodded, and at the end she said, She's not going to make this easy. No, he agreed. I can handle difficult, she said, and the quiet certainty in her voice was one of the things he had missed most without being able to name it. That particular strength of hers, the kind built not from never being hurt, but from being hurt and continuing anyway. I know you can, he said. I want to be clear about something, she said. I'm not coming back to be a trophy or a point you're making to your mother or a symbol of your independence. I am coming back because I love you. I've always loved you. That was never in question. She met his eyes. If this stops being about love and starts being about something else, I will leave again. And this time, you won't find me. I know, he said. Good, she said. Then yes. He looked at her. Yes, she said again, and smiled. And it was the realest thing he had seen in 4 years. The press conference was scheduled on a Thursday morning. The financial press expected a merger announcement. There had been deliberate rumors seeded about a new acquisition in the European market, enough to fill the room with cameras and journalists. Ji-hoon stood at the podium in a dark suit, his legal team to one side, his communications director to the other. His mother stood to his left. She had insisted. He had allowed it because she was still chairwoman, and he was not yet at war with her, and because part of him, the part that was still her son, believed she deserved the chance to handle this with dignity. The room settled. He leaned into the microphone. 4 years ago, he said, The most important person in my life was forced to disappear. The room shifted. Notebooks came up. Phones appeared. Through a combination of deception, coercion, and document forgery, my wife was manipulated into believing that I had chosen my family's business interests over our marriage. She left to protect her family from threats made against them. He paused. The room was absolutely silent. I spent 4 years looking for her. Last month, I found her. A camera flash went off, then several more. The Khan Group will be announcing a governance restructure that separates family authority from operational leadership. This is long overdue and reflects the company's commitment to transparent governance. He stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. He walked off the left side of the stage, where Amara was standing behind a sound curtain in a deep burgundy dress, her braids loose around her shoulders, her face calm in the particular way of someone who has decided to stop being afraid. He took her hand. He walked back onto the stage. The room got louder. He spoke into the microphone, his voice steady. "This is my wife. We will be remarrying. I wanted you to hear it from me, directly, rather than from a press release." The cameras were relentless. Somewhere in the crowd, a journalist shouted a question about the governance restructure. Another shouted something about the previous engagement. Someone near the back was already on the phone. The stock ticker did something interesting for about 40 minutes before stabilizing. The board sent 7 different messages to his phone in the following 3 hours. He read none of them. His mother, on the stage beside him, stood straight and still and expressionless. And later, in a brief statement of her own that nobody had asked for and everybody published, she said that she supported her son's personal decisions and wished the couple well. It was the most expensive sentence she had ever forced herself to say, and Ji-hoon knew it, and he was grateful for it, even while knowing it was not enough. 2 weeks after the press conference, at the Kang Foundation's annual charity gala, Amara wore a black off-shoulder gown and stood in a room full of people who had opinions about her. She knew they had opinions. She could feel them, the assessments, the whispers, the particular kind of attention that is not admiration, but its close and unfriendly cousin. She handled it the way she had learned to handle everything, with her back straight and her face composed, and her absolute refusal to perform discomfort for an audience that hadn't earned it. She was speaking to the foundation's literacy director when Chairwoman Kang appeared at her elbow. Ji-hoon was across the room. Far enough. The chairwoman looked at her with the expression of someone who has decided to conduct a final test. "You understand," she said, quietly, pleasantly, in the tone she used for all her most dangerous conversations, that this world has certain expectations, certain standards. You are a lovely woman, but lovely women who do not belong here have a habit of finding it very uncomfortable. Amara looked at her. She thought about the apartment in Seoul and the photographs of her family and the assistant with the slim folder, and 4 years of rebuilding herself from the belief that she had not been enough. She thought about her father's auto shop and her brother finishing his degree, and her mother's voice on the phone saying, "Baby, you sound different. You sound like yourself again." She thought about the woman she had become in the space that grief had carved out. Tougher, sharper, more honest, more genuinely herself than she had ever been when she was afraid. She looked at Chairwoman Kang and said, calmly and clearly, "I survived you. I belong anywhere." The nearest cluster of guests went quiet. One of them began to applaud, softly at first, then less softly. The literacy director, who had heard the exchange, made no effort to hide her smile. Someone further along the room, who had not heard, but had seen, began to applaud as well, for reasons they couldn't fully articulate, but felt with certainty. Chairwoman Kang held her gaze for 1 more second. Then she inclined her head, barely the smallest possible acknowledgement, and moved away. Ji-hoon was beside Amara within 30 seconds. "Are you all right?" he said. "I'm fine," she said. And this time when she said it, it was true. Entirely. Uncomplicatedly true. I'm better than fine. The governance restructure was completed within 6 weeks. A new board framework separated Chairwoman Kang's ceremonial role from operational decision-making authority. Ji-hoon's voting rights were restructured in a way that made future interference effectively impossible. The political alliance that his mother had spent years building through his social life quietly dissolved, which caused a brief media ripple and then stopped being interesting. The former fiancé, Han Seo-yeon, issued a brief and somewhat dignified public statement, confirming that her previous connection to the Kang family had been a business arrangement, and wishing everyone involved well. She was, Ji-hoon had always believed, a decent person placed in an indecent situation, and he wished her the same. His mother retreated to her role and stopped making moves against Amara, which was not forgiveness and not defeat, but was the specific kind of ceasefire that happens between people who respect each other's capability for damage. Ji-hoon accepted it for what it was. Amara began the management trainee program and did not resign from it. She had told Ji-hoon on their third conversation in Brooklyn that she was not going to be absorbed back into his life and lose what she had built, and he had heard her, and the life they were constructing now had space in it for her ambitions and her independence and her opinions that were frequently different from his and always worth hearing. He liked that she challenged him. He had forgotten how much until he found her again. She liked that he had not tried to make her smaller. She had worried, in the quiet hours before she said yes, that love's second attempt might be love performing what it remembered, rather than love encountering what had actually grown. But he was different too, less certain of his invincibility, more willing to sit in difficult conversations, quicker to say I don't know, and mean it. Grief had done its work on both of them. It had taken things, but it had also cleared space. The remarriage ceremony was small by design. Ji-hoon had suggested something larger, and Amara had looked at him with the particular expression she used when she was deciding whether to be patient or direct, and she had said, "The last time we got married, it was just us in a registry office, and I was the happiest I had ever been. Why would I want more people for round 2? He had laughed for the first time in what felt like months, and the decision was made. New York rooftop. December. String lights warm against a cold sky. Her brother Marcus, who had taken the scholarship and graduated, and could not stop hugging Ji-hoon with a sincerity that was borderline alarming. Her mother, who cried from the moment she arrived, and seemed completely unbothered by this. Patrice, in the most aggressively formal dress she owned, looking satisfied in the manner of someone whose advice has been validated. Ji-hoon's oldest friend from university, who had received the call at 2 a.m. and said, "I knew it," and gone back to sleep, and shown up and now wearing an expression of complete vindication. They stood facing each other in the winter light. He said, "4 years ago I failed to protect you from something you should never have had to face. I am not going to stand here and promise that the future holds nothing difficult, because I am not naive, and neither are you. But I promise that whatever it holds, I will be standing beside you for it. I will not let fear make my decisions, and I will not let my family make yours, and I will spend every year we have left treating you like the woman you actually are, which is extraordinary." She took a breath. She said, "I spent 4 years believing a story about myself that was not true. I believed I was the kind of woman who could be bought out of importance, who could be removed from a life and leave no permanent mark. And then I had to survive that belief, and in surviving it, I found out that the story was wrong. I am not that woman. I am the woman who came back." She held his gaze. "I love you. I have always loved you. I am done being frightened of that." He put the ring on her finger. She put the ring on his. The small crowd made the small crowd sounds that small crowds make when they are full of people who genuinely care about the 2 people in front of them. Warm and a little messy, and completely sufficient. Ji-hoon pulled her close and said, against her hair, quietly, "For no one else, This time, no one separates us. She tilted her head back and looked at him with the expression he had first fallen in love with, across a restaurant table in Itaewon. Steady and clear and entirely present. The expression of a woman who had decided to be exactly where she was. Obviously, she said, and the city glittered beneath them, indifferent and magnificent, and the night was cold, and the lights were warm, and 4 years of loss folded itself quietly into the past where it belonged, leaving room, finally, for everything that came next. If this story moved you, held your attention, or made you feel something real, you know what to do. Hit that like button, leave a comment below, telling us which moment hit you hardest, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. We put everything into these narratives, and your support is what keeps them coming. See you in the next one.